Welcome to Artistic Adventures. Before I had my surgery on my knees, I did the repaint on this Rapunzel doll, so I thought today we'd work on her dress and I'll show you how to use her original dress as a pattern. Okay, so here's our doll that we had repainted, and I want to give her sort of a Christmassy looking dress, and I am going to try to sell her in my Etsy shop, and I'll put the link below in the description box if you're interested, along with all my other dolls that I have for sale there. So this is the skirt, although I'm not going to use this style where you just gather it and sew it on, but you could do that certainly. And this is a little insert of the bodice, and then it has two pieces on either side of that. So I have those cut out, and I'm not going to use that lacing sort of, I guess, supposed to be medieval castle kind of thing. I think I'm going to use some lace over this pretty, sort of a cranberry red faux raw silk. It's polyester, but it looks sort of like raw silk. And then that's the back, the two pieces of the back. So I cut two pieces, but I just used one side because they're symmetrical. And that's the sleeve. And it actually had elastic at the bottom, but I'm not going to put elastic at the bottom of the sleeve. So there's a couple of things I'm going to change, and this is how you could, do your own dresses from dolls or even humans. If you take them apart, you can just make a pattern out of the pieces. So I'm going to measure her waist, and it's 9 inches. Such a big change from Monster High. Woohoo! And that's going to be important because that'll be the circle that I cut out in the middle of the skirt, because I'm going to make it a circular skirt, so it'll have more swing to it. I have a sort of idea in mind of what I want to do, so I think the skirt will look better with a wider hem. So I'm going to lay this out, and then I sort of want to measure the length, though, from the waist to the bottom of the skirt to give me an idea of how long the skirt would be. So it looks like it's about right at 6 inches. And I have a ruler that is exactly 6 inches, so I'm going to use that. But first I want to roll up this tape to the 9 inches, and I'm going to mark a circle inside of that so I know where the opening of the waist is supposed to be. And then this area will be the length of the skirt. I'm also going to put a dot right in the middle. That's going to help me when I cut this out later. Well, when I do the final cut, I'll show you in just a minute. I've done this before in some other videos, so you're probably aware of it. So then I'm just going to go from the edge of that circle that I made out 6 inches all the way around and make a mark. And you can make as many marks as you want to help guide you in cutting. I think I did about 8. But whatever you need to make sure that you're cutting, in a circle and not go from dot to dot, because then you'll end up with some straight pieces instead of rounded pieces. But I've done this so many times now, I kind of can eyeball it almost. But it doesn't matter if you're exact, because once you get it cut out, we're going to do another thing that helps us make it exactly a circle. We're going to go to that dot that I put in the middle, right there. I'm going to pick it up right at the dot, and then we're going to fold it so we can see where we're uneven. And I'm going to fold it I think 4 times, and then we'll cut the part that's the lowest. So we're going to cut off all that top part that's sticking out. That'll make it even all the way around. And again, you're cutting at an arc, you're not cutting straight across, so this is gonna look like a circle. There we go. So there's our circle. We're gonna put that aside for right now, and I folded this material over, and we're gonna cut out a couple sleeves here. I really want to still use the same sleeve design, but I'm just gonna not put elastic in the bottom of it. I'm just gonna leave the arms loose. This is going to have some detail at the hem and at the neckline, so I didn't really want to put a lot of detail in the sleeve area, so that's why I'm not putting the elastic in the bottom, because I kind of would have put lace around it if I put elastic in the bottom, but you can do whatever you want. So once you have these pieces, you have your pattern, and you can kind of, play around with it and then make different looking dresses. You don't have to do it exactly the same way. So here's that middle piece that I was telling you about. And although I cut two just because my material was folded, you only need one of these. So I'm going to try to put some lace over this. And I have pulled out several pieces of wide lace that I have from my friend Deb, who sent me a lot of scraps that she had used. And I kind of, I want it to be white lace for sure because of there's something else I'm going to put on the dress that's white. So I'm just looking at what I think would look good in the middle of the bodice. And it's kind of hard with this lace because there's repeating designs. And so, you kind of want to have, like it has a flower, put the flower in the middle, but then, it has two things on either side that don't look the same. So it was kind of harder than I thought it was going to be to come up with what I was going to use. So here I was trying to use the flower, but then on either side there are different designs. So I didn't like the way that looked. So I'm going to go back to this original piece. It's kind of, it's not really symmetrical, but the designs are small enough that I think it looks okay. So I decided that's what I would use. But it's nice to have all these little pieces of lace around so you can pull them out and use them when you need them instead of like trying to go to the store and look at some. They have such poor selections anymore, like in the fabric stores for lace. It's really hard to get nice lace anymore. I guess I have to go online, although I've never done that because I have all this lace from Deb. So anyway, I'm going to just pin the edges of this lace to this piece of the bodice, and then I'm going to sew around the edges at the very, very edge on the sewing machine. That's just to keep the lace attached to that fabric while I'm sewing it to the other pieces. I think it'll make it stay in place a lot better. So I'm just sort of pinning around the edges right now, and then I'm going to trim the excess lace off, and then we'll take it over to the sewing machine and sew right at the edge. You could do this by hand too if you wanted to, but I'm moving quick today. I want to get this dress all made and my video made. So I'm going to put about, I don't even know if it's going to be 1/8 of an inch, maybe 1/8 of an inch around. And then we're going to take this part, which is the two sides of the front. And this material is the same front and back, so it really doesn't matter. That's nice. I always like that because that way if I get messed up, it doesn't matter where I put it. So I'm going to pin the side of this to the overlaced part, and we're going to sew that, and then we'll fold it back, and we'll come in and put the other side on, so that lace part will be in the middle. Alright, so we've done that sewing, and that's how the front of the bodice looks. And now this is the back of the bodice, and for this to start with, because I want to put the sleeve on with the sleeve open, the opening not sewed together, I'm going to do the shoulder seams first. I'm just going to put a little small seam in there. One of the things I had a problem with, I'll say, is the seams that were originally sewn in the dress were very, very narrow. So I almost feel like if I did this again, I would cut extra on the outside because I wasn't really able to sew it that close. But I wanted the sleeve hole opening here to be laid out so that I can pin this to it easier instead of trying to close up the sleeve opening and then put the sleeve in. I think this is easier for these small pieces, like for dolls. For adults, usually you will go ahead and do the side seam. So we're going to put a gathering thread in here, and we did that quick with the magic of editing. Then we're going to gather that sleeve up. And then I'm going to start in the middle and then go to either end and sort of use my fingers to work the gathers around so that they're kind of, you know, moved around evenly and not all lumped up in one place. So that's kind of what I'm doing there. And at one point I even pulled the thread out, so I had to kind of just put some pins into little pleats that I made. And hey, you go with what you got when you have an adventure. So that's what I did. But this is a much easier way to sew sleeves in for these smaller sizes. Probably even for like small children's patterns too. Alright, so I've got that sewed now, and this is how it looks. Got a little puff sleeve. And you could put elastic in the bottom if you wanted, but I'm not going to do that. Pardon my dog's barking. But now we're going to sew the bottom of the sleeve seam and the side seam. So that's the front and of the bodice there, or the back of the bodice, and then this other part is the sleeve. So I'm just trying to line it up so that the edges are meet, and then I sewed that, and apparently I didn't show it to you after I sewed it. Okay, anyway, so I'm back to the skirt. This is my circle. Now I put fray check around the circle for the opening, and also down the back, and I thought I had showed that on one of the videos, but apparently I didn't. So anyway, I'm cutting out right at the line of the fray check, which you can see sort of like a stain on the fabric, and then I'm going to cut down about 4 inches, and this is so we have a way to get the skirt on and off the doll. And I'm going to end up finishing that with some ribbon so that it doesn't show as an opening in the back. Okay, so we're just going to try it on just to make sure that the opening for the waist is good, and it is. Looks pretty good actually. So after we sew that, it's going to be a little bit looser because the seam will allow it to open up some. And I'm just putting a little bit more fray check around on an area where I was cutting, and I had to cut a little bit lower than where the fray check was. You can use this on all your seams for any of the material that frays. I did put it on the neckline of this dress because of how I'm going to finish it, and on the opening of the back. I didn't put it on all the seams, but I did on some of them. It just depends on how I'm going to sew it, or if it's going to be more visible or whatever. So now what I'm doing is pinning the right side of the bodice. I brought that up underneath that hole, the waist hole, to the right side of the skirt. So the right side of the skirt is face down right now. Could be because you can see the hem on the outside of it. And I started in the middle of the front, in the middle of the front of the skirt and the bodice, and I'm pinning around to the sides. So I don't really know exactly how much of the bodice I'm going to have left, since I'm using my own skirt design here. But it ended up being pretty good. I had some extra left, and that works out good because I want to be able to fold it over in the back and put some Velcro on it. Alright, so I sewed the waist seam, and so we've got the bodice attached to the waist now. And I'm just sort of opening everything up and pressing it down with my fingers so I can see it, and you can see how the sleeves ended up looking after we did the side seam and the bottom of the sleeves. So I'm liking how this is looking. I want to try it on the doll one more time. I want to see how the bodice back meets up in the back, and then I'll know how to hem the edges of the bodice back. So I do have a little bit extra, and that back seam that I cut that has the fray check, I'm going to put ribbon down on top of that so that it doesn't show. I'm just going to glue the ribbon down. And that way it'll look sort of finished, but it's an easier way to do it with a circular skirt. So you're probably asking, what would I do if I didn't want it to be that open? You could put a seam there, and if you did, you'd have to make the waist a little bit bigger to allow for the amount that you sewed in the seam. Now, I have this petticoat that I bought at a thrift store. It's like a children's petticoat. And I want to cut the bottom off and put it on the bottom of the skirt. And so it'll sort of look like the dress has a petticoat sticking out from under it, which I thought would be kind of cute. So what I'm going to do is just go around and cut off one of the layers of ruffle. And with the magic of editing, I'm going to cut it really fast. And get that thing done. This thing is really, has a lot to it. There's a lot of material here. So it kind of took a while to cut it. So I got a huge amount of it. I had plenty left over for something else. And what I'm going to do is pin this to the underside of the dress. And then I'll be able to sew it down on the sewing machine. Alright, so I left a little bit of the straight part of that so I could pin it down. But I'm leaving the ruffled part out. Alright, then I'm going to sew really close to the edge. And that'll also help hold that hem down. Because sometimes when you do those circular hems, they want to roll up. I like the way they look, but sometimes they cause a problem. And then you have to have an adventure. Alright, so I'm starting in the back because I'll have to cross over my lace to finish. And I want that in the back instead of the front. And because that was a circle that I cut out, there was actually a seam in it. So where I've cut it, it was where the seam was in it. I don't really want it to have a seam anywhere. So I'm just going to go around here and pin this and get it sewn, and then we'll see how everything looks. I like the way this kind of ruffled. It's kind of I guess it's like a polyester. It's not even organza. It's like a polyester netting kind of feel. But I like the way it looks. It really does kind of give it a Christmassy look. At first, I thought I might use white fur, but that was just too much. I think it turned out much prettier with the lace and with this fluffy stuff. I've been saving this petticoat for a while. I had it. I knew I'd find the right project for it, and this was it. So there you see how it turned out. I think it's a good contrast to the lace and the bodice. So the only thing left now is we've got to finish the neckline. And then remember I said I did put a fray check on it. And I held the fur up there again. I was like, well, maybe I'll put fur at just the neckline. No, that's too much. That's too much. So I found this lace that is another contribution from my friend Deb. And it has that beautiful red color in it. So what I thought I'd do is I sew this on by hand, and I'm going to gather it as I sew it. You don't have to do it that way. If you wanted to, you could gather it first and then sew it. But I'm just thinking that for how I want it to look, I want it to be really even and really gathered. I don't know, that sounds crazy, but I just have this image in my head. That's kind of how I work, you know. So I'm going to bend the edge around at the back. That's the neckline at the back to give it a finished look. And then I'm going to take my now tangled up thread. How I end up doing that. I'll get that untangled, and we're going to be sewing it right at the edge. Now initially I'm just getting the lace sort of tacked down. I'm just going back and forth. Because I've got it doubled, I wanted to make sure that I have it secured to the back of the neckline there. But then what I'm going to start doing is using my thumb to push a little bit of that lace forward and put a stitch in it, back and forth. So each time I do a stitch, I'm going to push forward with my thumb a little tiny bit of material, of lace, and that's going to make the ruffle. And this took a while. It's sort of tedious, but it really gave me the look that I wanted. And I thought it really worked perfectly with this dress, especially, with the colors. I'm really fortunate that I had this in here. So I'm not going to bore you guys doing this all on camera. I just wanted to show you how I got it started and kind of how it looks as I'm doing it. A few of these little gathers with my thumb pushing, and I'm holding the rest of it with my forefinger and thumb. And then we're going to take a look at our finished product. And I hope you like it as much as I did. I think it turned out pretty nice. But this is a nice way that you can, if you have your children, like say your children have dolls and they're wanting dresses, but they don't want the same dress, you can still use it. And you don't have to ruin the dress. You can always put the dress back together. Like you can make a paper pattern or paper towel pattern out of it, and then add things to it to make it look completely different. So here's our finished dress, and I think it does look really Christmassy. And I took Rapunzel's hair and braided it on two sides and then left the rest hanging just straight. But I really love how that lace coordinated with the fabric and just the overall look of the lace with that rich cranberry color. And there's a close-up of the skirt flared out, which I think looks really pretty like that. So as I said, I am going to make her like a Christmas doll, because there she is with her present. Put her up on my Etsy site and see if somebody would like to have a custom Rapunzel doll. So I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. That always helps. And as always, make sure you subscribe, because I don't want you to miss a thing. Thanks, and bye.